She ran from her toxic ex and took a job at a bar not knowing it belonged to a mafia boss. The brittle Chicago wind felt like shards of glass against Selena Blake's face. It tore through her thin coat, a flimsy barrier against the biting January cold and the gnawing terror that had propelled her onto a one-way bus ticket with less than $200 cash. Every rattling window of the aging bus had mirrored the fear in her eyes, the fear of him, the fear of knuckles on a door, of a voice that dripped poison, of hands that promised love and delivered only pain. She had left everything, her apartment, her friends, the steady 9-to-5 data entry job she'd secretly hated but clung to for its mundane safety. She'd left it all in the dead of night, a ghost slipping away before her ex, Derek, could materialize and trap her again. Now, standing on a street corner in a part of Chicago she only knew from whispered warnings, she felt utterly, terrifyingly alone. The neon sign of the Dark Wolf cast a flickering, blood-red glow on the icy sidewalk. It was less a welcoming beacon and more a stark statement. The building was old brick, solid and imposing, with windows so darkly tinted they looked like vacant eyes. Music thumped from within, a low, primal bass that vibrated through the soles of her worn boots. This was it. The only place that had called her back for an interview after a desperate, city-wide search online for jobs that paid cash. No questions asked. Her stomach churned with a mixture of dread and adrenaline. Quitting her old job without notice had been a reckless, necessary severing. Her bank account was a wasteland, emptied to fund this escape. The $30 she'd spent on the bus fare had felt like a mortal wound. She had maybe 2 weeks, 3 at most, before she was on the streets. The weight of her financial failure pressed down on her, almost as heavy as the memory of Derek's rage. Selena pushed her freezing hands deeper into her pockets, her fingers brushing against the crumpled piece of paper with the address. Taking a deep, shuddering breath that frosted in the air, she pushed open the heavy oak door. Warmth hit her first, thick with the scent of aged whiskey, stale beer, and something else, a faint, expensive cologne mixed with cigar smoke. The bar was dark, cavernous, and surprisingly plush. Deep velvet booths lined one wall. A massive, mirror-backed bar dominated the other, its mahogany surface gleaming under dim, amber lights. It was busy, but not rowdy. The patrons were well-dressed, their voices kept to a low, confident murmur. The staff moved with a quiet efficiency, dressed in crisp black shirts and pants. A man at the end of the bar, polishing a glass, looked up. "Can I help you?" His tone was neutral, not unfriendly, but guarded. "I'm here. I'm Selena Blake. I had an interview scheduled with Mr. Russo for a server position," she managed, her voice thinner than she'd intended. The man nodded, his eyes doing a quick, professional scan. "Russo's not in, but the boss is—" He gestured with his chin toward the back of the room, to a shadowed alcove where a booth sat partially obscured by a heavy curtain. "Go on, he's expecting you." Selena's heart hammered. The boss. She walked on unsteady legs, her boots suddenly feeling loud and clumsy on the polished wooden floor. The murmuring conversation seemed to dip as she passed. Or maybe that was just her paranoia. As she neared the alcove, a figure resolved itself from the shadows. He was tall, even sitting down. He wore a suit so perfectly tailored it seemed a part of him. The material, a black so deep it drank the dim light. His dark hair was cut sharp, military precise, and his face was all hard angles and shadow. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring into a lowball glass, swirling the amber liquid within. "Mr. Boss?" Selena stammered, feeling foolish. He didn't look up, not immediately. He simply stopped swirling the glass. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the distant clink of ice and the muffled bass. When he finally did lift his head, his eyes captured hers, and Selena felt the air leave her lungs. They were the coldest eyes she had ever seen, a pale, icy gray that seemed to see right through her flimsy coat. her rehearsed answers, her desperate fear. He was magnetic, not in a warm way, but like a force of nature, a dark star pulling everything into its orbit. There was no warmth in his expression, only a profound, assessing stillness. This was Carter Stone, and though she did not know his name, she knew in an instant that this man owned not just this bar, but every molecule of air within it. "You're Selina Blake," he stated. It wasn't a question. His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder, smooth but unsettlingly powerful. "Yes, sir." He held her gaze for another long moment, his expression unreadable. She felt stripped bare, her desperation, her flight, her flimsy lies all laid out for his inspection. "You have no experience in a place like this," he said, glancing down at the resume on the table she hadn't even seen. "I'm a fast learner," she said, finding a sliver of her old spine. "I'm punctual, I'm reliable, and I need this job. I won't let you down." A flicker of something not amusement, but perhaps interest passed through his cold eyes. He leaned back, the movement fluid and controlled. "This isn't a diner. Miss Blake, we have standards. Our clientele is particular." "I understand," she said, though she didn't. Not really. "Do you—" He leaned forward just slightly, and the intensity of his presence made her want to take a step back. "You're running from something. People who run are either desperate or stupid. Which one are you?" The question was a slap, sharp and unexpected. Her fear momentarily gave way to a flash of anger. "I'm desperate," she said, her chin lifting, "but I'm not stupid." For the first time, the corner of his mouth quirked, a fractional movement that was gone as quickly as it came. "We'll see. You start tomorrow, 8 p.m. Don't be late, Anya." He motioned to a passing server. "We'll get you a uniform." Selina just nodded, her mind reeling. That was it. No questions about her past, no references checked. "Thank you," she breathed, relief so potent it made her dizzy. "Don't thank me," Carter Stone said, his attention already returning to his glass. "I'm not doing you a favor. You're filling a slot. Perform, or you're gone. Now get out." She turned and fled, walking as fast as she could without running, the feel of his icy gaze burning into her back. She had a job. She had a paycheck coming. She had a chance. As she burst back out into the freezing night air, the red neon of the dark wolf staining the snow at her feet, Selina Blake had no idea that she hadn't just found a job. She had just stepped into a cage of a different kind, one owned and operated by one of Chicago's most ruthless and powerful men. She only knew she was safe from Derek, and for tonight, that was enough. Her first shift was a blur of polished glasses, complex cocktail names, and the constant, thrumming anxiety of being watched, the uniform. A crisp black button-down shirt and tailored black trousers felt less like a costume and more like armor. Anya, the server who had trained her, was sharp, efficient, and offered no personal comfort, only a rapid-fire list of rules. Rule number 1, never under any circumstances. Bother the clients in the velvet booths unless summoned. Rule number 2, what happens in the Dark Wolf stays in the Dark Wolf. Rule number 3, Mr. Stone sees everything. Selina learned the truth of that third rule within her first hour. She was balancing a heavy tray of drinks when she felt it a prickle on the back of her neck, a sudden shift in the air. She turned her head slightly. He was there, standing on the mezzanine level that overlooked the main floor, a place she had not even noticed existed. Carter Stone was utterly still, hands clasped in front of him, looking down not at the crowd but directly at her. His gaze was different from the interview. The icy assessment was still there, but it was layered with something else, something proprietary and almost possessive. It felt like a physical touch, pinning her in place. He watched her navigate the tables, his eyes tracking her every move, from the way she set down a glass to the way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and a flush of heat, entirely separate from the warmth of the room, crept up her neck. She fumbled a coaster, her hands suddenly clumsy. She quickly recovered, but she felt the weight of his attention for the rest of the night, a silent, heavy pressure that both terrified and electrified her. Over the next 2 weeks, Selena fell into a strange nocturnal rhythm. The pay was good, better than her old data entry job, and the cash tips were a lifeline that slowly began to rebuild her meager savings. But the place, and its owner, unsettled her more each night. She watched Carter Stone from a distance. He was not a typical boss. He was a presence, a king holding court. He would arrive around 10 o'clock each night, always immaculate in a dark suit, and the entire atmosphere of the bar would shift, tightening with a shared, unspoken tension. Men in suits that cost more than her entire year's rent would approach his booth. Heads bowed, speaking in low, deferential tones. He rarely smiled. His commands were given in that low, rumbling voice that carried no further than intended, yet seemed to shake the very foundations of the room. He had an aura of power that was absolute and inexplicable. It was more than ownership. It was dominion. The customers were the first real crack in the facade. They were not the rowdy, laughing crowds she was used to from other bars. These were quiet, serious people. Men with scars on their faces and eyes that held no light. Women with beautiful, cold faces and jewelry that glittered like ice. They conducted their business in the dim booths, their conversations too low to overhear, but their body language spoke volumes. Selena would clear tables and find herself in the middle of a silent, tense negotiation. She saw thick envelopes slide across tables, saw men nod once, their faces grim, before disappearing into the night. This was not a bar. It was a meeting place. Her suspicion turned to palpable fear one Tuesday night. It was slow, the bar populated only by the regulars, the ones who seemed to live in the shadows of the booths. Selena was assigned to Carter's section, a task that usually fell to Anya. Her hands were clammy as she approached his alcove. The curtain was partially drawn, but she could hear his voice, deeper and harder than usual, and another, unfamiliar voice. "The goods are secure at the warehouse," the stranger said, "but the dock shipment is hot. We had a problem." "Problems are expensive," Carter's voice rumbled, dangerously calm. "And I do not like expensive problems. Handle it. I want a 100% clean transfer by Thursday." "But Mr. Stone, the rat." "I am not interested in the rat," Carter snapped, and the sudden venom in his tone made Selena's blood run cold. "I am interested in my merchandise. If you cannot handle the goods, I will find someone who can, and you will handle him." Selena backed away, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Goods, shipment, warehouse, rat. These were not the words of a simple bar owner. These were the words from the movies Derek used to watch. Movies about men who solved problems with violence. She felt sick. She wanted to run, to grab her coat and flee back into the anonymous cold. But where would she go? Back to being hunted by Derek. She was trapped, trading one monster for another. She avoided his section of the bar for the rest of the night. Her nerves stretched taut, but as the last patron filed out and the lights began to come up, her dread solidified. It was almost 4 a.m. She was wiping down her last table when a large shadow fell over her. It was Marco, the mountain of a man who worked the door, his face a permanent, unreadable scowl. Selena's breath hitched. "Can I help you, Marco?" He just looked at her, his dark eyes impassive. "Mr. Stone wants to see you," he said. His voice was gravel. "In his office, now." The words landed like stones in the pit of her stomach. His office. She had never even seen a door to an office. This was it. He knew she had overheard. He was going to fire her. Or worse. The paranoid thoughts that had been her companions for months screamed to the surface. "Okay," she whispered, her hands shaking so badly she had to hide them in her apron. Marco did not move, just waited. Selena slowly untied her apron, her fingers fumbling with the knot. She placed it on the bar and turned to follow him. He led her not up the mezzanine, but toward the back. through a plain, unmarked door she had assumed was a supply closet. It opened onto a dark, narrow stairwell. The air grew colder as they descended. Her life, which she had fought so hard to reclaim, felt like it was slipping through her fingers. She was not just working at the Dark Wolf, she was in it. And as she followed the silent, imposing man down into the earth, Selina Blake realized her desperate escape had led her straight into the heart of a world she had no idea how to survive. The stairway was concrete and dimly lit, smelling of damp earth and cold metal. It descended deeper than she thought possible, ending at a heavy, steel-plated door. Marco swiped a keycard at an unmarked panel, and the door clicked open with a heavy, definitive thud. He gestured her inside and remained by the door, a silent, immovable guard. The office was a jarring contrast to the plush, dark bar above. It was spacious, starkly modern and flooded with cold, white light. One wall was a bank of monitors, displaying silent, black and white feeds from every corner of the bar, the entrance, the alley, and streets she didn't recognize. There was no clutter, just a massive desk of black steel and glass, and Carter Stone sitting behind it, his suit jacket off, his white shirt pristine, sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. He was not looking at the monitors. He was looking at her. "Close the door, Marco," he said, his voice flat in the soundproof room. The steel door shut with a final, sealing click, leaving Selina alone with him. The silence was absolute. Her heart was a trapped bird, beating violently against her ribs. She was sure this was the end. "You were listening," he said. It was not a question. Selina's blood turned to ice. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. A denial was useless. He knew. I didn't mean to," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. I was clearing the section. I'll leave. I'll pack my things. I won't tell anyone, I swear." He watched her, his expression unchanged, those pale, icy eyes stripping her down to her bones. He leaned back in his chair, the expensive leather groaning faintly. "You think I am a bar owner, Miss Blake?" I don't know what you are." "No," he said, a thread of something cold and sharp in his voice. "You did not, but you do now." He paused, letting the weight of the unspoken fill the sterile room. "You heard talk of goods and shipments and rats. These are not the concerns of a man who simply serves whiskey." He stood up, the movement fluid and silent. He was taller than she'd realized, a dominating presence that seemed to shrink the large office. He walked around the desk and stopped a few feet from her. She had to fight every instinct that screamed at her to run, to cower. "My name is Carter Stone," he said, his voice a low rumble. "This bar, the Dark Wolf, is part of my family's business. We are not in the hospitality industry. We are in the logistics industry. We move things. We solve problems. We are what the papers like to call the mafia." He said the word mafia with a chilling lack of emphasis, as if discussing the weather. Selina's knees went weak. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. It was one thing to suspect, to fear. It was another to have it confirmed, to be standing in a basement office with a man who had just admitted he was a mob boss. Why are you telling me this?" she stammered, tears of raw terror pricking her eyes. "Are you going to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Fire you," he finished for her, a dark, humorless quirk playing on his lips. "No, I am not, and I am not going to hurt you, not if you give me no reason to." He closed the small distance between them. She was forced to tilt her head back to look at him, his proximity overwhelming. She could smell the faint, clean scent of his soap and the sharp, expensive scent of his cologne. "You are valuable, Selina," he said, his voice dropping, becoming almost intimate, which was more terrifying than his anger. "I saw it the day you walked in here. You are a ghost. You have no one. You are running from something so bad that you would rather work in a place like this, for a man like me, than go back. You are smart, you are quiet, and you see things. People who are invisible are very, very useful. Shock, cold and sharp, pierced through her fear. He wasn't threatening her. He was appraising her, like a tool, like an asset. So here is the new arrangement, where he continued, his icy gaze holding hers captive. You are no longer just a server. You will still serve, yes, but you will watch, you will listen, and you will report to me anything you find. Interesting. The man in booth 4 who watches the door too much, the couple in the alcove who speak in whispers every time Anya passes. You will be my eyes and ears on the floor. In return, you keep your job, you keep the cash, and you are safe. No one will touch you, not your old problem, he added, with a certainty that made her skin crawl. And not any new ones. You are under my protection. Protection. The word sounded like a threat, a gilded cage. She looked at this powerful, dangerous man and saw her choices narrowing to a single point. Run again with no money, run into the same cold, unforgiving streets, with Derek perhaps still looking for her. Or stay, and become. Whatever it was he was asking her to be, a spy, a pawn in his dark game. The pragmatic, desperate part of her that had survived Derek, that had gotten her on that bus, made the decision. Okay, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'll stay. Good, he said. He stepped back, the intensity receding, leaving her gasping for air she hadn't realized she was holding. You work for me now, Selena, in all things. Remember that. The next week was a new kind of hell. She served drinks, she smiled at customers, but now everything was filtered through the lens of his command. She saw the bar for what it was, a fortress, a neutral ground, a den of sharks, and she was the small fish he had personally tagged. Then, one Thursday, late into the night, he found her by the bar. Get your coat, he said, no preamble. But my shift... It's not over for another hour. Your shift is over. Get your coat. You are coming with me. Terror flared, but she obeyed. Retrieving her thin jacket from the staff room, he led her out the back to a black idling sedan that was so clean it looked wet. He opened the back door for her. She got in. He slid in beside her. The car pulled away from the curb with a silent, powerful glide. Where are we going? She asked, her voice tight. A meeting, he said, staring straight ahead. You wanted to know about my business. You're about to get an education. They drove to a high-end steakhouse downtown. Long after it had closed to the public, they were ushered through the empty dining room to a private wine cellar. 4 other men were already there, seated around a heavy oak table. They were older than Carter, their suits just as expensive, their faces hard and lined with lifetimes of violence. They all looked at her as she entered, their eyes cold and assessing. Selena's blood ran cold. Carter pulled out a chair for her, not at the table, but just behind him, in the shadow. She is with me, was all he said, his voice a flat command that allowed no questions. For the next 2 hours, Selena sat in silence, invisible and terrified. As she listened to these men discuss their world, they spoke of territories, of shipments, of percentages, of rivals. They argued in low, guttural Italian and polished, cold English. It was a board meeting for monsters. And Carter was different among them. He was the youngest, but he spoke with an authority that belied his years. He was sharp, ruthless, and unyielding. Selena watched him, this man who owned her, and a new, terrible feeling bloomed in her chest, right alongside the fear. It was a strange, dark pull, an attraction to the power, the control, the absolute, dangerous certainty of him. He was a monster, yes, but he was her monster. And as he made his final point, silencing the table with a few, well-chosen, cutting words, she felt a terrifying, undeniable, and traitorous thrill. Selena's life became a series of dark tableaus. She still served drinks, but her true job began after her shift. She would sit in that cold, sterile office, reporting the whispers and glances she had collected. Carter would listen. His face an unreadable mask, his pale eyes absorbing every detail. He never praised her, but he started keeping her by his side more often. She was his shadow, his ghost, a silent observer in a world of predators. She learned to read him, not by his words, but by his silences. She saw the iron control he exerted over his men and the cold, pragmatic violence he deployed to maintain his empire. She saw him order men to be handled, and she learned not to ask what that meant, though the grim faces of Marco and the others who returned hours later told her enough. But it was in the quiet, unguarded moments, late at night when the bar was empty and the silence of the office was absolute, that she saw the cracks. One night, she brought him a glass of the whiskey he always drank. He was not at his desk. He was standing in front of the wall of monitors, though they were all turned off. He was staring at a single, framed photograph on a side table, a photo she had never seen him acknowledge. It was of a young woman with a vibrant, laughing smile and eyes the same icy gray as his. He did not turn as she entered, but his body tensed. "What is it?" he asked, his voice rough. "Your drink, Mr. Stone," she said softly, placing it on the desk. He did not move for a long moment. "Her name was Alara," he said, his voice so low she barely caught it. "She was my younger sister. She would have been 23 this year." Selina stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. This was a crack in the armor so profound it felt like a violation to witness it. "She was killed," he continued, his voice devoid of all emotion, a flat, dead calm. "5 years ago, a car bomb. It was meant for me." He finally turned, his face carved from stone, but his eyes were a different kind of cold, not icy, but burned out, like the heart of a dead star. "Our rivals, the Falcone family, thought it was a good way to send a message, and it was." He picked up the drink, draining half of it in one swallow. "Leave me," he said. She fled the room. His sister's phantom smile burned into her mind. The secret of his past settled over her, heavy and suffocating. She found Anya in the staff room, smoking a cigarette, her usual sharp edges softened by the late hour. "He told you, did he?" Anya asked, not unkindly. "About Alara, today is the anniversary." Selina just nodded, sinking onto a stool. "Don't make the mistake of pitying him," Anya said, exhaling a plume of smoke. "Don't you dare feel sorry for him. That man, the one you see was born in that fire, the Carter stone before that. He was different, Mia. This one is pure vengeance. He's not building an empire. Sweetheart, he is sharpening a blade. Every dollar he makes, every territory he takes. It is all just fuel to burn the Falcone family to the ground." Anya's words chilled Selina more than the car bomb story. The pity she had felt evaporated, replaced by a cold, stark understanding. This was not a man driven by loss. This was a man driven by a singular, consuming rage. He had not chosen this path to survive. He had chosen it to destroy. And she was his tool. The violence escalated in the following weeks, as if the anniversary had triggered a new, darker phase. It was no longer just whispers and veiled threats. A shipment of goods was hijacked. In retaliation, a restaurant known to be Falcone territory was burned to the ground. Selina came to work one night to find the front window of the Dark Wolf shattered. A clear message. She was in the office with Carter when the call came in. He listened, his face hardening, his only reaction a tightening of his jaw. "Marco," he said, hanging up. "Take 2 men, the warehouse on West Cermak. Someone talked. Find out what they said and end it. I want a picture in an hour." Selina's stomach roiled. End it. He had given the order as casually as he would order a drink. She watched Marco nod once and leave, and she realized, with a sickening lurch, that she was not afraid. She was accustomed. The line between the normal world and this dark, violent world had blurred until it was gone. The true test came a week later. Carter was in his office, a map of the city spread across his desk, when Marco entered, his face grim. "Boss, we have a problem." The drop at the old church is compromised. Falcone's men are watching the entire block. But the package, it is time sensitive. It has to be moved in the next 30 minutes. Carter's eyes scanned the map, his mind working with terrifying speed. His gaze flicked from the map to Marco, and then to her. "Selena," he said, his voice sharp. "Yes." He pointed to a spot on the map. "You know this alley 2 blocks from your apartment? It cuts behind the bakery." She nodded, her heart beginning a slow, heavy pound. "Yes, I walked past it." "The package is in a locker at the bus station 2 blocks north. The key is here." He slid a small, plain key across the desk. "The client will be in that alley in 20 minutes. He's an old man, feeding the pigeons. He will be wearing a red scarf. You will take the key, retrieve the package. It is a small, brown paper-wrapped box, about the size of a book. You will put it in your purse. You will walk, not run, to that alley. You will hand the man the package. You will not speak to him. You will then walk home, and you will not come to the bar. You will wait for my call." This was not a request. It was an order. He was using her ghost status, her non-threatening presence. A woman walking at night would draw less suspicion than any of his men. "Carter, what if I am caught?" she whispered, the words tasting like ash. He stood up and walked to her, and he did not touch her, but he stood so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. He looked down at her, his icy eyes boring into hers. "You will not be caught," he said, his voice a low, compelling rumble. "You are invisible. Remember, you are my ghost. Go, now." Her hand, trembling, closed around the small, cold key. She was no longer an observer. She was a participant. She was an accessory. She walked out of the office, past Marco's impassive stare, and up the stairs. As she stepped out into the cold Chicago night, the weight of the key in her pocket felt heavier than a gun. She was his. And as she moved through the dark streets, a new, terrifying feeling began to surface. It was not just fear. It was a dark, electric pulse of dependency. Her survival was now tied to his, and his, in this one small, dangerous moment, was tied to hers. The walk back from the alley was the longest of her life. Every footstep on the pavement, every distant siren, every car that slowed at a junction, sent a spike of pure adrenaline through her. She clutched the strap of her empty purse, the phantom weight of the package still there. She made it to her tiny, cold apartment, locked the 3 deadbolts, and slid to the floor, her back against the door, shaking. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a number she did not recognize. She answered with a trembling hand. "Hello?" "Did you do it?" Carter's voice. No greeting. "Yes," she whispered, her voice cracking. "The man, the red scarf, it's done." There was a pause, a beat of silence filled with unspoken static. "Good," he said finally. His voice was flat, but there was a low vibration in it she had not heard before. "You did well, Selena. Stay inside. Do not go out. I will send a car for you tomorrow night." The line clicked dead. She sat on the floor for an hour, his voice echoing in her ears. He had used her name, not Miss Blake, Selena. The next night, the black sedan was there, just as he'd promised, but it did not take her to the Dark Wolf. It drove past the bar, past the familiar territory, and headed north toward the glittering, wealthy high-rises along the lake. She was taken to a service elevator, up to the penthouse. The doors opened directly into his home. It was not a home. It was a sterile, beautiful cage in the sky. It was 3 times the size of her entire apartment building, with windows for walls that overlooked a sprawling, glittering carpet of city lights. The furniture was all black leather, chrome, and glass. There was no art, no photos except the one of Alara, which sat on a solitary, stark black mantelpiece. Carter was standing by the window, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring out at the city he so clearly owned. "Come here," he said, without turning. She walked toward him, her footsteps silent on the polished marble floor. He turned as she approached, his eyes raking over her. He was not in his suit, but in black trousers and a simple dark gray Henley that stretched across his broad chest. It was the most casual she had ever seen him, and somehow the most dangerous. "You were afraid last night," he said. "I was terrified. But you did it." He took a sip of his whiskey. "You followed every instruction. You did not panic." He stepped closer, and the familiar, overwhelming magnetic pull of him filled the space. "I told you that you were valuable." "I am not a tool, Carter," she said, her voice stronger than she felt, fueled by the lingering adrenaline of the night before. His eyes flashed, a flicker of that icy fire. "No," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You are not. You are more." This was the new dynamic. The lines, once so starkly drawn, were now hopelessly blurred. He no longer dismissed her to the office. He kept her with him. They would sit in his booth, and he would murmur observations about the men they were meeting, his voice for her ears alone. He would take her on drives, the silent black sedan cutting through the city, and he would talk. He spoke of his rivals, the Falcones, not with the cold anger she'd heard before, but with a calculated, surgical precision. He was teaching her. And he began to ask about her, about Derek. He did not ask for details, but for facts, his name, where he lived, what he had done. She found herself telling him, the words spilling out in the safe, soundproof confessional of his car. He liked to control things, she whispered one night, staring at her own reflection in the tinted window. He liked to hurt what he controlled. Carter's hand, which was resting on the center console, tightened into a fist, his knuckles turning white. "He will not touch you again," he said, his voice flat and absolute. "You do not know that," she said, the old fear twisting in her gut. "He's crazy. He'll look for me." "He was looking for you," Carter said, turning to look at her, his gaze so intense it was a physical weight. "He made 2 calls to a private investigator in Chicago last week. The investigator and your ex have been strongly encouraged to end their search permanently." Selena's blood ran cold. "What did you do?" "I protected my asset," he said simply. "I protect what is mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified her. It should have sent her running. Derek had been possessive, and his possession was a fist. But this was different. This was a fortress. Carter was a monster, a killer, a man who ended problems. But his violence, his power, it was now a shield, turned outward to protect her. And God help her. She had never felt safer in her life. The conflict tore her apart. She was falling for a man who represented everything she should have hated. She, who had run from violence, was now willingly living in its shadow, drawn to the very center of the storm. It came to a head one night in the penthouse. A meeting had run late. She was exhausted. The tension of the last few weeks coiled in her shoulders. She had been waiting for him, and when he entered, he looked tired. The iron mask had slipped, just a fraction, and she could see the man beneath, the one Anya said had been born in fire. He unfastened his cufflinks, his eyes on her. "You should have gone home," he said. "Your driver is waiting downstairs," she replied, not moving from her spot by the window. He walked to the bar, pouring 2 drinks. He handed one to her. Their fingers brushed. The contact was electric, a static shock that jolted up her arm. She flinched, but did not pull away. He stood in front of her, blocking the view, becoming her entire view. "You look at me," he said, his voice a low murmur, "like you are trying to decide whether to run or to stay." "I am," she whispered, her heart hammering. "You are a dangerous man, Carter." "I am," he agreed, his eyes never leaving hers. "And you are not made for this world, Selena." "And yet, here I am?" "Yes," he said. "Here you are." He set his glass down on the windowsill, slowly, as if not to startle her. He lifted a hand. He did not touch her face. He touched her hair. his fingers gently brushing a stray strand from her cheek. His touch was not cold, as she had expected. It was warm, his skin calloused but his motion surprisingly tender. She found herself leaning into the touch, her eyes fluttering closed. This was madness. She was standing in a mafioso's penthouse, a participant in his crimes, and she was letting him touch her. "What am I doing?" she breathed, more to herself than to him. "You are surviving," he said, his voice now a rough whisper just inches from her face. His other hand came up to cup her jaw, his thumb stroking lightly over her pulse, which was hammering against his skin. His icy gray eyes were now molten, dark with an intensity that had nothing to do with business or violence. It was a raw, naked hunger that was directed solely at her. "And you," she whispered, meeting his gaze. "What are you doing?" "I'm breaking my own rules," he said. And then his mouth was on hers. It was not a gentle exploration. It was a claiming. It was a desperate, immediate, an overwhelming kiss that stole the air from her lungs. His lips were firm, demanding, and they tasted of whiskey and power. One hand left her jaw, sliding around her waist, pulling her flush against his hard body. His other hand tangled in her hair, tilting her head back, deepening the kiss. There was no thought, no fear, only a blinding, white-hot sensation. She kissed him back with a ferocity that matched his, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, holding on as the world spun away. It was a kiss of shared darkness, a dangerous acknowledgement of the line they were both crossing. It was a brand, a promise, and a point of no return. When he finally broke the kiss, they were both breathless, his forehead resting against hers, the city lights spinning in a blur behind him. The silent penthouse was crackling with the new, undeniable, and terrifying thing they had just unleashed. That kiss was a breaking point. The fragile, unspoken rules that had governed their interactions, boss and employee, predator and prey, protector and asset, had shattered. Now, standing in the silence of his penthouse, the city lights blurring around them, they were just a man and a woman, both of whom had stepped off a cliff. He did not let her go immediately. He kept his forehead pressed to hers, his hands still gripping her, his breathing heavy. The cold, controlled mask of Carter Stone was gone, replaced by a raw, unguarded man she had never seen. "Selena," he breathed, his voice a rough gravel. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his icy eyes now a stormy, turbulent gray. This changes things." "I know," she whispered, her own heart hammering against his. "It changes things for you," he clarified, his tone hardening, the control sliding back into place. "It is one thing to be my ghost, it is another to be this." He released her and stepped back, the sudden loss of his warmth leaving her cold. He turned and walked to the window, staring out at the city as if it held the answers. "What you stepped into, Selena. It is not just business. It is a war." He turned back to her, his face now set in the familiar, hard lines of the boss. "The Falcone family, the ones who killed my sister. They are not just rivals. They are actively trying to dismantle everything my family has built for 50 years, and they are winning." This was new. The vulnerability he had shown her in his car, the story of his sister, was not the full truth. She had seen it as vengeance. She was wrong. "You said you were avenging her," Selena said. "Vengeance is a luxury," he snapped, his voice sharp. "This is survival. For the past 6 months, we have been bleeding. Every shipment I move, they know. Every meeting I hold, they are one step ahead. My father and my grandfather built this city. I am losing it, and I am losing it because I have a traitor in my house." The word hung in the sterile air between them. Traitor. "One of my own men," Carter continued, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble. "Someone who sits at my table, someone who calls me boss. It could be Marco. It could be Russo. It could be any one of the men who have known me since I was a child, and I cannot see him." He looked at her, his gaze so intense it was a physical blow. "But you are still the ghost, Selena. They do not see you. Not really, they see a server, a girl. The boss's new interest." He said the word with distaste. "They will be careless around you. They will talk. They will let things slip. They would never do that around me." She understood. The kiss had not made her his partner. It had made her his most intimate, most dangerous weapon. "You want me to spy on your men," she stated, her voice flat. "I need you to," he corrected, his voice raw. "I need your eyes. I need you to find the man who is trying to kill me." Before she could answer, his phone, which sat on the black glass desk, buzzed once. A text. Carter walked to it, his movements stiff. He read the screen, and all color drained from his face. A stillness, more terrifying than any rage, came over him. "What is it?" "Get your coat," he said, his voice a dead calm. He was already shrugging into his suit jacket. "Now, Selena." "What happened?" she demanded, grabbing her own thin coat. "That was a message from Marco's phone," Carter said, pulling a sleek black firearm from a desk drawer and sliding it into the waistband at the small of his back. "But Marco is downstairs, in the lobby." The blood in her veins turned to ice. "The traitor, he has been using a ghost phone to mimic my inner circle's numbers. He just sent a message to the Falcones. He told them where I am, and he told them I am with you." The next seconds were a blur. Carter grabbed her arm, his grip like a steel manacle. He did not lead her to the elevator. He dragged her toward a plain, unmarked door in the wall she had assumed was a closet. He slammed his hand against a keypad, and it opened onto a dark, narrow stairwell. "This leads to the garage. Stay behind me," he ordered. They plunged into the darkness. They were halfway down the third flight when they heard it, the unmistakable thump of the penthouse elevator arriving, followed by the heavy, splintering crash of his front door being breached. Selena's blood roared in her ears. This was not a movie. This was real. Men were in his home, coming for him, coming for them. They burst into the subterranean garage. Carter did not go to his black sedan. He pulled her toward a nondescript dark blue pickup truck parked in a dim corner. He shoved her unceremoniously into the passenger side and vaulted in after her, the engine roaring to life. He was backing out, tires squealing, when two men in dark tactical gear emerged from the stairwell door, their weapons raised. Carter did not slow. He slammed the gas, the truck lurching forward. "Get down," he roared. Selena screamed and dove for the floorboards as the world exploded in a hail of gunfire. The truck's windows shattered, glass spraying the cab like ice. A bullet punched through the metal door where her head had been just a second before. Carter's arm shot out, his hand clamping onto the back of her neck, holding her down with a brutal, protective force. He was driving one-handed, his other arm a human shield over her. He swerved, the truck fishtailing, and she heard the sickening crunch of metal as he slammed the side of the truck into one of the gunmen, pinning him against a concrete pylon. The other gunman opened fire again. Carter cursed, a raw, guttural sound, as he hit the button for the garage door. They burst out into the alleyway, tires screaming on the wet pavement, and accelerated into the night, leaving the chaos and the gunfire behind. He drove for 10 minutes in absolute silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his jaw a rigid line. He only released his grip on her neck when he had put 5 miles between them and the penthouse. Selena pulled herself up, her entire body shaking so violently she could barely breathe. She was covered in tiny shards of glass. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice a reedy, terrified sound. "Oh my God, Carter!" He did not look at her. He pulled the truck into a dark, deserted industrial park and cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by her gasping sobs. He finally turned to her. His face was a mask of cold fury, but his eyes were blazing. He reached out, not with tenderness, but with a raw, shaking urgency. His hands grabbed her face, his thumbs wiping away the tears and the grit. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his voice a rasp. "Selena, look at me. Are you hurt?" "No," she sobbed. "No, I'm okay." His eyes scanned her, desperate and wild, searching for any sign of injury. When he found none, the strength seemed to go out of him. He pulled her to him, his arms wrapping around her like steel bands, crushing her against his chest. He buried his face in her hair, his body shuddering with a single, controlled tremor. It was not the cold, controlled embrace of a boss. It was the desperate, clinging hold of a man who had almost lost everything. He was protecting her. He had shielded her with his own body, had driven them through gunfire, had put himself between her and the bullets. She clung to him, her fear momentarily eclipsed by a stunning, profound realization. She was not a pawn. She was not a tool. To this cold, dark, violent man, she was something more. "I'll do it," she whispered against his chest, her voice muffled in his shirt. He pulled back, his hands framing her face, his icy eyes searching hers in the dim light. "What?" "I'll help you," she said, her voice stronger now, solidifying with a new, hard resolve. "I'll be your eyes. I'll find him. I'll find the man who did this." She had made her choice. She had seen the raw, savage truth of his world, and it had almost killed her. But she had also seen the raw, savage truth of his heart. And she knew, with a terrifying, absolute certainty, that she was no longer running. She was standing with him. Her life had been irrevocably changed, and she would never be the same. The attack on the penthouse was the catalyst. The war was no longer a cold, strategic game of whispers and shadows. It had become brutally, violently hot. Selena was moved from her apartment immediately. She never went back. Carter installed her in a new safe house, a nondescript brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, guarded around the clock by men whose faces she did not recognize, men loyal only to Carter. She was no longer his server. The facade was gone. She was now, officially, his. And she had a new job. Carter's war room was the entire top floor of the brownstone. He had stripped it bare and filled it with technology. And while he and his men, Marco now, his constant, silent shadow, dealt with the fallout, Selena found her purpose. Carter had given her access to everything, every camera feed from the Dark Wolf, from his warehouses, from the penthouse garage. "You see things, Selena," he had told her, his hands gripping her shoulders, his icy eyes searching hers for the resolve he needed. "You see what we are all trained to ignore. Look, find him." So she looked for days. She drank nothing but black coffee and watched. She watched the comings and goings at the bar. She watched the staff. She watched the regulars. She watched Marco. She watched Anya. And she watched Russo, the bar manager, the man she was supposed to have interviewed with. Russo, who was always present, always calm. Russo, who'd been with Carter's father for 20 years. Russo, who always had a kind word for the staff and a deferential nod for Carter. And on the third day of watching, her eyes burning with exhaustion, she found it. She rewound the footage from the night of the attack on the penthouse. The text that had lured them out had come at 9:53 p.m. At 9:51 p.m., the camera in the back office of the Dark Wolf showed Russo alone, ostensibly closing out the registers. He was on his personal phone. He typed a quick message, his thumb a blur. Then he looked up. He looked directly into the hidden camera, a camera he should not have known was there. And he smiled, a tiny, almost imperceptible, triumphant quirk of his lips. Then he deleted the message he had just sent. Selena's blood ran cold. He had known. He had been the one. The ghost phone mimicking Marco's number, it was Russo. When she showed Carter the footage, his reaction was terrifying in its stillness. He watched the clip, his face turning to granite. He did not yell. He did not break anything. A profound, lethal cold emanated from him. "Russo," he said, the name a shard of glass. "He taught me how to tie a tie. He was a pallbearer at my grandfather's funeral. The betrayal was a living thing in the room, coiling and dark. "What do we do?" Selena asked, her voice a whisper. Carter looked from the screen to her. "A traitor is not just a man," he said, his voice a low, chilling rumble. "He is a cancer. You do not just remove him, you burn out the entire sickness. He is the Falcone's way in. And now, we will use him to shut the door." The plan was simple, and it was terrifying. Carter would use Selena as bait. "He thinks you are my weakness," Carter explained, his hands framing her face. "He thinks my affection for you has made me sloppy, careless. He told the Falcones I was with you at the penthouse, believing it would make me an easier target. He will believe it again." They would leak a rumor. Carter, addled by his new infatuation, was making a reckless move. He was going to meet a new supplier himself at an old, abandoned warehouse on the river, and he was bringing the girl, too distracted to leave her behind. The information was fed to a low-level guy known to be in Russo's pocket. They knew Russo would pass it straight to the Falcones. It was a trap, set to catch both the rat and the hunters. The night of the meet, the air in the warehouse was thick with the smell of rust and damp decay. Selena's heart hammered so hard she was afraid it would be heard. She was terrified, but a strange, cold resolve had settled over her. Carter stood beside her, his presence a solid, warm wall in the darkness. Marco and 3 other men, his most trusted, were hidden in the rafters above. "Just stay behind me," Carter murmured, his hand briefly squeezing hers. "This will be over soon." The heavy steel doors of the warehouse screeched open, not with the arrival of a single supplier, but with the headlights of 3 black SUVs. They were not here to talk. They were here for an execution. "Now!" Carter's voice roared, and the world exploded. The men in the rafters opened fire. It was chaos. Gunfire echoed and flashed in the vast, dark space, the sound deafening. Carter pushed Selena behind a stack of rusted steel barrels, pulling his own weapon, firing in controlled, precise bursts. Selena crouched, her hands over her ears, her eyes squeezed shut. This was it. This was the end. But a new sound cut through the din, a single gunshot, different from the others, coming from behind them. She opened her eyes. Carter had moved to engage 2 of the Falcone gunmen who were advancing on their position, and behind him, slipping out from a side door she had not even seen, was Russo, when he was not in the fight, and he was an executioner. His gun was raised, aimed not at the Falcones, but squarely at Carter's undefended back. There was no time to think, no time to scream. Carter was occupied, a second away from a bullet he would never see. "Carter!" Selena's scream was raw, tearing from her throat. It made Russo flinch. He turned his head, his eyes widening in surprise at seeing her. That 1 second of hesitation was all she had. Carter had given her a small pistol that morning, pressing it into her cold, trembling hand. "I do not want you to use this," he had said, his voice harsh. "But I will not have you defenseless. Point and pull. Do not think." She was not thinking. She was just reacting. She pulled the gun from the waistband of her jeans, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She raised it with both hands, just as she had seen in the movies, just as Carter had briefly shown her. Russo was turning his gun from Carter to her. She pulled the trigger, once, twice. The sound was small, a pop compared to the cannons around them. Russo stopped. He looked down at his chest, where 2 dark, wet stains were blooming on his shirt. His expression was not of pain, but of pure, dumb surprise. He looked up at her, his mouth open, and then he fell, his gun clattering to the concrete floor. The warehouse fell silent seconds later. The Falcone men were dead or gone. The trap sprung. Carter was at her side in an instant, his hands all over her, checking for wounds, his face a mask of primal fear. "Are you hit, Selena? Talk to me. Are you hit?" he demanded, his voice frantic. "No," she breathed, the gun falling from her numb fingers. No." He pulled her into a brutal, crushing hug. his body shielding hers, his heart hammering against her. But Selina could not feel it. She could only stare past him, at the body of Russo, at the man she had just killed. The enemy was dead, the traitor was gone, but as Carter held her, she realized with a sickening, final clarity that she had crossed a line. There was no going back. She had looked into the abyss of Carter's world, and now it had looked back. She had become a part of it, bound to him not just by affection, but by the shared, dark stain of violence. She was irrevocably his. The drive back from the warehouse was a silent, screaming void. The distant wail of sirens grew fainter as Carter navigated the truck, now riddled with bullet holes, through a labyrinth of dark, industrial streets. Selina sat in the passenger seat, rigid. She was not crying. She was not shaking. She was utterly, terrifyingly still, her hands lying open in her lap, palms up, as if she could still feel the weight of the pistol. They arrived at the brownstone. The guards at the door, men she had never seen before, flanked them as Carter, his hand firmly at the small of her back, guided her inside. She moved like an automaton, her feet obeying commands her mind had not issued. He did not take her to the war room. He took her to the main residence, a part of the house she had never been in, all warm woods and soft lighting. It felt like a violation to bring the stench of gunpowder and death into it. He sat her down on a plush velvet sofa. "Stay here," he said, his voice a low, rough command. He disappeared for 5 minutes. When he returned, he was carrying a small bowl of warm, soapy water and a soft cloth. He knelt in front of her. She stared blankly at the wall over his head. "Selina," he said, his voice gentle, a tone so foreign it almost broke her concentration. She did not respond. He took her hands. They were trembling now, a fine, high-frequency tremor. He carefully, methodically, began to wash them, his callous thumbs working over her knuckles, cleaning away the invisible film of gunpowder residue. He cleaned the small cut on her cheek where a shard of glass had grazed her. He was not a boss. He was not a killer. He was just a man, tending to her, his touch agonizingly tender. And that, finally, is what broke her. A single, choked sob tore from her chest. It was not a cry of fear. It was a sound of profound fracture. She had not just killed a man. She had killed the woman she used to be. The girl who ran from Derek, the server who just wanted a safe life, that person was dead, left behind on the concrete floor of the warehouse, right next to Russo. I, she stammered, the words catching in her throat. His face. He looked surprised. Carter dropped the cloth, his hands coming up to grip hers tightly, anchoring her. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice thick. He waited until her tear-filled eyes met his. "You did not do this. I did. I brought you into this. I put that gun in your hand. This blood is mine. Selina, it is all mine." She shook her head, a violent, negative motion. "I pulled the trigger. I killed him. Carter." "You saved my life," he said, his voice a raw, guttural. "He was going to shoot me in the back. You saved my life. Do you hear me?" "But what does that make me?" she whispered, the question a hollow, terrifying void. "I ran from one monster, and I—" He pulled her from the sofa, pulling her hard against his chest, his arms wrapping around her like a shield. He held her as she finally, fully, broke. She wept into his shirt, her fists clenching the material, all the terror and adrenaline and the sickening reality of the past few hours pouring out of her. He just held her, his hand stroking her hair, his own body rigid with an emotion she could not name. Their relationship had been forged in the shadows of the dark wolf, tested by gunfire, and now sealed in blood. The dynamic between them was no longer boss and subordinate, no longer even protector and protected. They were survivors, bound by a shared, dark secret. In the 2 days that followed, a strange, heavy calm settled over the house. The war, it seemed, was over. With Russo gone and the Falcone ambush completely dismantled, Carter's enemies were crippled. His men were cleaning up the city, re-establishing his dominance. But Carter did not leave the brownstone. He stayed with her. They existed in a quiet bubble. They ate meals they did not taste, and they talked. But not about that night. They talked about her childhood, about the books she liked, about the small, mundane things that suddenly seemed like precious relics from another life. And he held her every night. She would wake up from nightmares of Russo's surprised face, and Carter would be there, his arms pulling her back, his voice a low rumble in the darkness. "You are safe. I am here." But she was not safe, not from herself. She looked at this man, a man she was coming to love with a desperate, all-consuming intensity, and she felt a gnawing, terrifying anxiety. She could not survive this. Not the world, but the cost of the world. She had killed once to save him. Would she have to do it again and again? At what point would she look in the mirror and see him staring back? On the third night, he found her sitting by the window, staring out at the quiet, snowy street. He had been on the phone, his voice low and decisive, handling the vast, unseen mechanics of his empire. He finished his call and came to stand behind her. "It is done," he said. "The Falcones are broken. They have sent for terms. The traitor is gone. It is over." "Over," she said, the words sounding foreign. "Is it ever over?" "Carter." He was silent for a long moment. He knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his face, which she had always seen as cold and controlled, now looked weary. He looked at her, his icy eyes filled with a profound, aching sadness. "I made a mistake," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I brought you into my world. I thought I could protect you here. I thought I could use your strength to shore up my own." He shook his head. "I was wrong. I did not protect you. I only tainted you with my darkness. I showed you the worst part of myself, and I made you a part of it." "Carter, no." "Yes," he insisted, his grip tightening on her hands. "But I will not make that mistake again, He took a deep breath. "I am leaving." Her heart stopped. "Leaving? Not without you, unless that is what you want." He hurried on, a rare lack of control in his voice. "The organization is stable. Marco can run it. He has been loyal. I have a villa in Italy on the coast. It belonged to my grandmother. It is quiet. It is safe. There are no guns. There are no enemies. Just the sea." He looked at her. All the power, all the authority, all the cold command stripped away. He was just a man, his soul exposed, offering her the one thing he had left. "Come with me, Selena," he pleaded, his voice rough. "Leave Chicago. Leave all of this. Let me be the man you deserve. Let me just be Carter, with you." It was the ultimate crossroad. It was the escape she had dreamed of, a life of peace and safety, with the man she loved. But as she looked at him, at this powerful, dangerous man who was offering to give it all up for her, she felt a paralyzing wave of uncertainty. Could he truly walk away from this? Could the Mafia boss just stop? And who was she? Was she the terrified girl who had run from Derek, or the woman who had killed for Carter? Could she just go back to a normal life, even in a villa by the sea? She looked into his desperate, hopeful, icy eyes and found her own reflection. She saw the ghost of the woman she had been, and the warrior she had become. The choice was hers, and she did not know if she could make it. Selena stared at him, at this impossible, violent, tender man who was offering her an escape, the villa in Italy, the quiet life by the sea. It was the dream of the girl she used to be. It was the life she had been running toward when she fled Derek. It was everything she should have wanted. But she looked down at her own hands, lying in her lap. She could still feel the phantom weight of the gun, the recoil kicking back into her palms. She could still see Russo's eyes, wide with shocked betrayal before they glazed over. The girl who wanted the quiet villa by the sea would never have been able to pull that trigger. And that girl was gone. "Can you?" she whispered, her voice rough. Carter's brow furrowed. "Can I what?" "Can you leave?" she asked, finally meeting his gaze, her own now clear and unflinchingly honest. "Can you?" Carter Stone, Mafia boss of Chicago, just walk away. Can you be a man who just watches the sea? He hesitated. It was the smallest, most fractional pause, but to her, it was a canyon of truth. In that second, she saw it all. He could not leave. This world, this empire, this life. It was not a job he could quit. It was not a coat he could take off. It was his blood, his legacy, his curse. It was him. And he had been born in the fire of his sister's death. Just as Anya had said. "I would," he said, his voice tight. "For you, I would try." She gave him a sad, small smile, and it was the smile of a woman, not the girl. She reached out and touched his cheek, her fingers tracing the hard line of his jaw. "No," she said softly, "you would try. And you would sit on that beautiful terrace, and you would look at the sea, and you would be empty. You would be a lion in a cage, and you would hate it, and eventually, you would hate me for caging you." "Selena, that is not true. I ran from Derek." She cut him off. "No, ina asahadan," her voice gaining strength. I ran, and I ended up in your bar. I'm tired of running, Carter's." She took a deep breath, and the decision settled over her, solid and heavy and right. "I am not going to Italy. I am not running anymore." He searched her face, his icy eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and a dawning, terrible understanding. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I am staying," she said, her voice firm. "Here, in Chicago, with you, with all of this." She waved a hand encompassing the safe house, the city, the violence, the entire dark world he inhabited. He recoiled as if she had struck him. "No," he said, his voice flat. "Absolutely not. I am giving you a way out. I am giving you a life. Do you know what you are choosing? You saw that warehouse? You saw what this is." "I saw it," she agreed, her gaze unwavering. "And I saw what I am. I am the woman who saved your life, Carter. I am the woman who killed a man to do it. The girl who wanted the villa is dead. But this woman, the one I am now, she does not belong by the sea. She belongs here, beside you. Selena, I cannot protect you forever if you stay in this," he argued, his voice rising, the first crack in his control. "I am offering you safety." "You are my safety," she said, the truth of it hitting her with the force of a revelation. "It is not the walls, or the guards, or the money. It is you. But I will not be the reason you abandon who you are, and I will not abandon who I have become." He stared at her, truly seeing her, perhaps for the first time. Not as a victim, not as a ghost, not as an asset. He saw the woman who had faced him down, who had survived him, who had saved him. He saw his equal. He stood up, pulling her to her feet with him. His hands framed her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks, his eyes scanning hers as if he could read her very soul. He was not angry. He was awed. "You are," he breathed, his voice thick with an emotion she had never heard from him. "The strongest person I have ever known." He leaned in and kissed her. It was not the desperate, claiming kiss from the penthouse. It was not the frantic, clinging kiss after the attack. This was a kiss of pure, unadulterated acceptance. It was a kiss that said, "I see you, all of you, and I am not leaving." When he pulled back, the last of his armor had fallen away. The cold boss, the vengeful son, they were still there. But now, she saw the man, too. "I love you, Selena Blake," he said, his voice raw. "I love you for the fear you conquered, and I love you for the strength that saved me. I will not lie to you. This life, it is a monster. It will demand things from you. It will demand things from us." "I know," she said, her hands finding his, lacing her fingers with his, "and I am not afraid." He gave a low, rough laugh. "You should be, but I am glad you are not." He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, his chin resting on her head. He was silent for a long moment, simply holding her, breathing her in. "A part of me," he confessed, his voice a murmur against her hair, "was terrified you would say yes. I do not know how to be that man. Selena, the man by the sea. I know how to be this one. I know how to keep you safe here. I know how to fight for us, and I will." She closed her eyes, leaning into the solid, warm strength of his chest, the ghost of Russo, the memory of Derek, the shadow of the woman she had been. They were all there. She could not change the past. She could not erase the blood on her hands or the darkness in his. But she could accept it. She could choose. "Then we will face it," she whispered, her voice resolute. "Together." He tilted her chin up, his icy eyes now burning with a fierce, unwavering light, a reflection of her own resolve. They stood together in the quiet room, bound not by innocence, but by a shared, dark knowledge. The future was a chaotic, dangerous, and uncertain storm. But for the first time in her life, Selena Blake was not running from it. She was standing firm, hand in hand with the king of the storm itself. The decision to stay was a choice made in the fire of the warehouse, but it was solidified in the quiet, heavy stillness of the brownstone. The man who had offered her an escape to Italy was a man desperate to protect her. The man who accepted her choice to stay was the king who had just found his queen. They did not return to the Dark Wolf, not at first, and they did not return to the penthouse, still scarred by the attack. For a month, they lived in the brownstone, and the world recalibrated around them. The Falcones were shattered, their operations absorbed or dissolved. Carter's organization, having excised its cancer, grew stronger, tighter. The loyalty to him now absolute. Marco, his face carved from stone, had watched Selena save his boss's life. He no longer looked at her as a distraction. He looked at her with a fierce, unwavering respect. She was not just the boss's lady. She was the one who had seen the traitor. But this quiet, insulated life was not the one she had chosen. She had not chosen the villa by the sea, and she had not chosen this guarded, silent house. She had chosen him and his world. One evening, she stood from the sofa where she had been reading. Carter was across the room on the phone, his voice a low, authoritative rumble as he finalized a deal. She walked to him, and he paused his conversation, his eyes, now never cold when they looked at her, questioning. She did not say a word. She simply took the phone from his hand. "He will call you back," she said into the receiver, her voice calm and firm, and she ended the call. Carter raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement and something deeper in his gaze. "We are not living here anymore," and she said, "It was not a request. I'm tired of hiding." "Where would you like to go, Selena?" he asked, his voice soft. "Home," she said, "to the penthouse." The penthouse had been rebuilt. The shattered glass was replaced by panels even stronger. The splintered door replaced with reinforced steel. The bullet holes in the walls plastered and painted. But it was not the same. When they walked in, the air was different. The sterile, cold emptiness was gone. While they had been in the brownstone, Carter had, in secret, moved her. Her few possessions from her old apartment, the ones he had apparently had his men retrieve after convincing Derek to disappear, were there. Books on a new shelf, a soft, worn blanket she had loved draped over a new leather armchair. It was his way of trying to blend their worlds. "It is different," she said, running a hand over the soft wool of the blanket. He came to stand behind her, his arms sliding around her waist, pulling her back against the solid wall of his chest. "I am not the same man who lived here." "Selena," he murmured, his chin resting on her head. That man was a ghost. He was running on vengeance and memory. He was empty. You filled the empty spaces. He kissed the side of her head. You are my home, not this place. She leaned back into him, a sense of peace settling over her, something she had not felt since ever. Not even before Derek. This was not the timid safety of an anonymous life. This was the profound, absolute safety of being the most valued, most protected, and most dangerous person in the city. Life found its new rhythm. It was a life lived on the edge of a blade, but she was no longer afraid of falling. She was at his side, at the Dark Wolf, which he had reopened, stronger than ever. She sat in the booth, no longer a ghost, but a presence. The men who came to meet with him addressed their respect to him, but they directed their caution to her. She was the one he listened to. She was the one who saw everything. One night, they stood on the balcony, the one that had been shattered by gunfire. The wind coming off the lake was cold, but she felt warm in his arms. The city glittered below them, a carpet of diamonds, oblivious to the rulers in the tower above. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, her voice quiet. "That you stayed, that I made you stay?" He turned her in his arms, his hands cupping her face. His eyes, those icy gray eyes that had once terrified her, were now her anchor, filled with a burning, steady light. "I regret," he said, his voice a low, rough vow, "that this is the only world I have to give you. I regret that you had to bleed to get here. I regret every second you were afraid, and I regret, more than anything, that you had to save me." "Carter," she began, but he shook his head, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "But I do not regret that you are here," he said, his voice fierce and absolute. "You are the queen in this tower, Selena, and I am the monster at the gate, this world. It will never be safe. There will always be another Falcone. There will always be another Russo. There will always be a new threat, a new fight." "I am not afraid," Vashi said, her hands covering his. "Not as long as I am with you." "And you will be," he promised. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "I will never be the man in the villa by the sea. I cannot give you that peace, but I can give you this. I will be your shield. I will be your sword. I will stand between you and the entire world. I will always protect you, Selena, even from myself, whatever this life throws at us, whatever darkness comes for us. It will have to go through me. That is my promise." She looked up at him, at her boss, her protector, her lover. He was a dangerous man. He was a killer. He was hers. She rose on her toes and kissed him, not with the fire of their first kiss or the desperation of the attack, but with the deep, steady, and unbreakable promise of a future they had chosen, together, in the heart of the storm. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to know where in the world you are listening from. Please let us know in the comments and share your thoughts. We love connecting with you. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Story, like this video, and give us your extra support by pressing the hype button to help this story be heard by more people.